This is a reading from the notebooks by Maria Valtorta, 1945 to 1950, June 17th, 1946. Distressed, embittered, and filled with doubts about everything and everyone, and even about the blessed voice, by men's behavior regarding the work, I felt determined to offer resistance to what I had come to think was a diabolical trick, since, I told myself, if it were He, the Lord, who was dictating, He would also be able to protect His dictations, and I drank the bitterest chalice. But the voice of Jesus, anguished, urgent, and most loving in its yearning, appeared calling to me, imploring me, Maria, 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 it is I. And how can you doubt this? Even in this storm, is your spirit perhaps disturbed? No, it is at peace. It does not fear the death of the flesh, because it is at peace, and does not fear the Lord. And it does not fear Him, because I am peace. I told you so at the beginning of the dictations. A sign that it is I is the peace I instill. O Maria, my Maria, do not be delirious. Do not go so far as not to recognize me anymore. John, my little John, it is Jesus. It is your Jesus who is calling you, suffering with you, and weeping on seeing you so scorched by pain that you are no longer able to recognize me. Maria, my violet, why don't you see that this is your Redeemer, your Lord, your love? My poor, poor daughter, and what should I say to those bringing you into this state? In order not to say something tremendous, I will be silent with them, but woe to those for whom the word no longer speaks. Come, my poor daughter, here like this on my heart, here in my arms, here like a frightened child. My Maria, my little faithful voice, do not suffer. Do not resist my word. Do not fear deceit. I will console you so much that I will convince you. I will reconquer you, you that now adore God, but fear the one speaking to you. I am your father, mother, spouse, brother, friend, and priest, everything. I told you so. It is the hour in which I am all. It is the hour in which I am all. The hour in which you have come, as I foretold, to be with me alone, because men cannot follow the victims onto their cross, but rather are torturers in the torture of the victim. And He took me, reluctant as I was, and consoled me. It was time for that, since they were killing me by taking away the peace of not being afraid. June 20th, 1946. Saint Azariah announced himself to me with one of those very sweet, unrepeatable angelic songs which have remained in my soul as the most heavenly things I have savored. The light and song of paradise are something indescribable in both beauty and effects. As I had already been calmed in my torment after the words of my Jesus the day before yesterday, this song ended up plunging me once more into the full, joyful, at once solemn and cheerful peace which has been my element since I became the instrument of my beloved Jesus. And as I wrote, I listened to this song, a pure melody which is not a word, but which is only the sound of a sweetness ascending as far as blessedness. Oh, it is unutterable. I listened and understood more things in that moment than in months of meditation entirely on my own. I knew that once that instant was over, I could not even explain what I had understood. It was too sublime. But the fruit of what I had understood would remain in my soul. This song made me understand what the Eucharist is for the heavens, for those inhabiting them. This song enlightened me on the ardent angelic desire to receive this bread. Oh, footnote 244. We omit over 46 handwritten pages containing Azariah's commentary on the Mass for Corpus Christi, and then his lessons dated June 20th, 3rd, and 30th, and July 7th, 1946, on 3 other Masses, for the octave of Corpus Christi, for the Sunday in the octave of the Sacred Heart, and for the commemoration of St. Paul on the 4th Sunday after Pentecost. July 12th, 1946, Friday. I was weeping because it was Friday, the day for Holy Communion, and I was deprived of it. The agony, always acute, became tremendous. My whole spirit wounded, was moaning, and my flesh suffered as if mortally stricken. And while weeping, I thought of both the cruel and the good ones among my brothers in religion, considering that the good ones suffered with me, and for the same cause as I, and I offered my suffering to relieve theirs, and to wrest a definitive yes from Jesus concerning the manuscripts. For this time, divine intransigence was not bending to any prayer. Footnote 245. In minute writing, certainly at a later date, she added, when the Father General had ordered that I no longer be brought Holy Communion, I nearly died. It was then that Jesus sent me Father Luigi. See notes 237 and 201. My Lord came and consoled me, saying, Here I am, little John. They do not let us be one. I and you a ciborium containing me, for the joy of both of us. Little John, let us love one another, and may love be fusion. Come, on my chest, little John, like the other John, and let my love enter into you to give you what has been denied you. Union bestows confidence. Blessed, I asked for the grace which Father Berti, Father Migliorini, and others requested. Jesus grew severe with the unbearable gaze of the moments when he is more justice than mercy. I looked at him in fear, even though I knew that glance was not for his poor Maria. He moved slowly around the room and bent over the handwritten notebooks which had come back from Rome for the corrections to the pre-gospel. He repeated some isolated sentences found therein. I recognized them. He turned and asked, You understand them, don't you? Yes, my lord. Do you want me to write them? No, they are already written. To repeat them would mean provoking their judgment, which is always the same. Is that the way you speak to priests? The sentence spoken to me on numberless occasions by the priests of Israel, for those who are at fault, speak imperiously to silence those who are right, saying, You are at fault, in order not to say, I have been at fault. And even when the words come from wisdom, and are known to come therefrom, they say, It's you that have spoken, in order to strike out at the creature. Do not rewrite them then. They are already written here so that they will read them, and they are written elsewhere, where no human hand can manage to destroy or human eye refuse to read. For this reason I tell you that in all truth they shall read them one day, but these notebooks and the others which are still in Rome must return to this house under your protection. The delay obtained does not change the decree, even if it were my own vicar, who with the heart of a true Christ took the work, and you under his protection, and grace and blessing would descend upon his head from the divinity. The manuscripts must return here, to the house of my spokesman. The sign of my condemnation of what has been done against your spirit must remain as an admonition for those who have acted and those who will be their successors. The tremendous torture they have caused you shall never be erased from your spirit, either on earth or in heaven, here as a mark of agony, there as a sign of glory. Great tribulation becoming election, as stated in John's Apocalypse. Footnote 246, Revelations chapter 7, verses 13 to 14. Let this sign remain for them as in you, for I can forgive all that is done to the instrument, since I have mercy on the dead, like those of the church in Sardis. Footnote 247, see Revelation chapter 3, verse 1. And I give them time to confirm what is not yet dead, and revive what has been extinguished. That is, the capacity for understanding God through you, my voice. But I cannot pass over without a sign of punishment what is being done to your spirit, and even more to me, in refusing to let us be united in the sacrament, to nourish you with the sacraments which I have instituted for all the souls in the grace of God, or in need of returning to grace, and to refuse, while knowing your conditions and those of this city. With my blood I paid for all souls. I paid in advance. I gave myself so that you may have me. Who can refuse me to my beloved children? I cannot forgive everything, because if it is true that I am he who forgives, as the condition for the measure of forgiveness, I establish the measure of the love shown by the blameworthy. Here, no love has been shown either God, for whom communicating himself is a joy, or you, a soul for whom to receive me is life. And if I forgive the pain caused the spokesman, I punish for the pain caused your soul as a Christian. Make this known as well to those to whom it should be said. And Jesus departed after having blessed me. This was at 9:30. At 11, the mail brought me 2 letters, or rather 3, one from Father Migliorini, in contrast to the one from Father Berti the same day, one from Sister Savian in Venice, footnote 248, see note 103, and the notebooks 1944, note 540, and the third from Father Pennoni, who mentioned his intention of turning to the Holy Father to receive protection. I shall not make any comments. I simply observe that Jesus has already set forth this possibility, confirming, however, that even in this case, the manuscripts must return to me. Footnote 249. We omit 10 handwritten pages containing Azariah's commentary on the Mass for the 5th Sunday after Pentecost. July 14th, 1946. Jesus teaches us to die. Jesus says, I dictated a holy hour for those who desired it. Footnote 250. See the entry for July 14th in the notebooks of 1944. I revealed my hour of agony in Gethsemane. Footnote 251. A number of references to Gethsemane are to be found in the notebooks, 1944. See, for example, the entries for May 6th and September 13th. And of course, the agony in Gethsemane is fully described in the major work on the Gospel. To give you a great reward, for there is no greater act of trust among friends than to reveal one's pain to a friend. The supreme proof of love is not laughter and a kiss, but tears and sorrow made known to a friend. You, my friend, have known it. Through the time you spent in Gethsemane, you are now on the cross, and you feel mortal afflictions. Lean on your Lord as he gives you an hour of preparation for death. My Father, if possible, remove this cup from me. It is not one of the 7 expressions on the cross, but it is already an expression of passion. It is the first act in the passion which is beginning. It is the necessary preparation for the other phases of the Holocaust. It is invocation of the giver of life, resignation, and humility. It is prayer in which the will of the Spirit and the frailty of the creature, finding death repugnant, are interwoven, as the flesh is ennobled and the soul is perfected. Father, oh, it is the hour when the world withdraws from the senses, and thought, while like a descending meteor, thoughts of the other life, of the unknown, and of judgment approach. And man, always an infant, even if 100 years old, like a fearful child remaining alone, seeks the breast of God. Husband, wife, brothers and sisters, children, parents, friends, they were everything as long as life was far from death, as long as death was a thought hidden under distant clouds. But now that death emerges from underneath its veil and advances by an overturning of the situation, it is parents, children, friends, brothers and sisters, husband and wife who now lose their clearly defined outlines and grow dim in the face of the imminent advance of death. Like voices fading out in the distance, everything on earth loses strength, as what is beyond gains intensity, what seemed so far away until yesterday, and a movement of fear strikes the creature. If it were not painful and fearful, death would not be the final punishment, and the final means for expiation granted to man. Until sin appeared, death was not death, but dormition. And where there was no sin, there was no death, as with Mary most holy. I died because all sin was upon me, and I experienced the horror of death. Father, oh, this God so often not loved, or loved last of all, after the heart has loved relatives and friends, or has had more unworthy loves for creatures of vice, or has loved things as gods, this God so often forgotten, who has allowed himself to be forgotten, who has left people free to forget him, who has let them act, who has sometimes been mocked, sometimes cursed, sometimes negated, now rises again in human thought and takes up his rights once more. He thunders, I am. And in order not to cause death from fear by the revelation of his power, he tempers that powerful I am with a gentle word, Father. I am your Father. There is no longer terror. The sentiment prompted by this word is abandonment. I who had to die, who understood what it is to die, after having taught men to live, calling the Most High Yahweh, Father, thus taught you to die without terror, calling the God who amidst the pangs of agony rises again or becomes more present to the spirit of the dying Father. Father, do not fear. Do not fear him, you that are dying. This God who is the Father, who does not step forward as an executioner armed with account books and an axe. He does not step forward cynically, tearing you away from life and affections, but he comes opening his arms to you, saying, Come back to your dwelling. Come to rest. I will compensate you with interest for what you are leaving. And I swear to you, in my breast you shall be more active for those you are leaving than by remaining here below in a hard and not always remunerated struggle. But death is always pain. Pain from physical suffering, pain from moral suffering, pain from spiritual suffering. It must be pain to be a means of final expiation in time. I repeat, and in a flickering of mists which alternately dim and disclose what has been loved in life, and what makes us fearful of the beyond, the soul, the mind, and the heart, like a ship caught up by a great storm, pass on from calm zones already in the peace of the imminent port, now close by, visible, so serene that it is already communicating a blessed quietude and a sense of repose, like that of someone who, having nearly finished a laborious task, gets a foretaste of the joy of the rest to come, into zones where the storm shakes them, strikes them, makes them suffer, get frightened, and moan. It is once again the world, the anxious world with all its tentacles, family, business affairs. It is the anguish of agony. It is fear of the final step. And after, the darkness attacks, suffocates the light, and hisses its terrors. Where has heaven gone? Why should I die? Why do I have to die? And the howl is already gurgling in one's throat. I don't want to die. No, my sisters and brothers, who are dying because it is right to die. It is holy to die, since it has been willed by God. No, do not cry out like that. That howl does not come from your soul. It is the adversary who is influencing your weakness to make you say it. Turn the rebellious, vile howl into a cry of love and trust. Father, if possible, remove this cup from me, like the rainbow after the storm. That cry thus restores light and quietude. You see heaven once more, the holy reasons for dying, the reward for dying, that is, to return to the Father. And then you comprehend that the Spirit too, or rather, that the Spirit has greater rights than the flesh, because it is eternal and of a supernatural nature, and thus holds precedence over the flesh. And then you say the words which are absolution of all your sins of rebellion. But may your will, not mine, be done. That is peace. That is victory. The angel of God embraces you and comforts you, because you have won the preparatory battle to turn death into a victory. Father, forgive them. It is time to divest oneself of all that is a weight, to fly more securely to God. You cannot take with you either affections or riches which are not spiritual and good, and there is no man who dies without having to forgive one or many of his fellows for something, and in many areas, for many reasons. What man reaches the point of dying without having suffered the harshness of betrayal, estrangement, deceit, usury, or any other form of harm from relatives, consorts, or friends? Well then, it is time to forgive, in order to be forgiven, to forgive completely, leaving aside not only the rancor, the memory, but even the conviction that our reason for indignation was proper. It is the hour of death. Time, the world, business affairs, and affections come to an end and become nothingness. Now only one truth exists, God. What good is it then to carry over the threshold what belongs to this side of the threshold? To forgive. And since reaching the perfection of love and forgiveness, which is not even to say, and yet I was right, anymore, it is very difficult, is very too difficult for man. The task of forgiving on our behalf thus passes on to the Father, to give him our forgiveness. Him who is not a man, who is perfect, who is good, who is the Father, so that he will purify it in his fire and give it, once it has been rendered perfect, to those deserving forgiveness. To forgive the living and the dead, yes, the dead too, who have been the cause of pain. Their death has removed many sharp edges from the indignation of the offended. It has sometimes removed all of them, but the memory still remains. They have caused suffering, and one remembers that they have caused suffering. The memory always sets a limit upon our forgiveness. No, not any more now. Now death is about to remove every limit from the spirit. One is entering the infinite. To remove, then, this memory, too, which limits forgiveness. To forgive so that the soul will have no weight and torment from memories, and be at peace with all the brothers and sisters who are alive or have been or are being purified before encountering the peaceful one. Father, forgive them. Holy humility, gentle love of the forgiveness granted, which entails forgiveness asked of God for the debts towards God and towards one's neighbor, of those requesting forgiveness for their sisters and brothers. An act of love. To die in an act of love is to receive the indulgence of love. Blessed are those who are able to forgive in expiation for all their hardness of heart and for their sins of wrath. Here is your Son. Here is your Son, to give up what is dear with a far-sighted, holy thought, to give up affections and yield oneself to God with no resistance, not to envy those possessing what we are leaving. In this expression you can entrust to God all that you care about and that you are abandoning, and all that occasions you anguish, including your own spirit. To remind the Father that He is the Father, to place in His hands the Spirit returning to the source, to say, now then, here I am, take me with you, because I give myself. I am not yielding out of necessity. I give myself because I love you, as a son returning to his father. And to say, now these are my dear ones, I give them to you. These are my worldly affairs, the affairs which on certain occasions prompted me to be unjust, envious of my neighbor, and to forget you because they seemed to me of capital importance. They were, but I thought they were more than they were, for the well-being of my family, for my honor, for the esteem they brought to me. I also thought only I was capable of safeguarding them. I thought I was necessary to carry them out. Now I see. I was nothing but an infinitesimal tool in the perfect organism of your providence, and often an imperfect tool, ruining the work of the perfect organism. Now that the lights and voices of the world are ceasing, and everything is drifting away, I see and hear how insufficient, shabby, and incomplete my works were, how much they were out of tune with the good. I took it for granted that I was a big deal. You were far-seeing, provident, and holy, and corrected my works, and made them still useful. I was presumptuous. Sometimes I even said that you did not love me, because what I wanted did not turn out well, as with others whom I envied. Now I see. Have mercy on me. Humble abandonment, grateful consideration of providence in reparation for your acts of presumption, avidity, envy, and replacement of God with poor human elements, with greediness for various forms of wealth. Remember me. You have accepted the chalice of death. You have forgiven, and you have given up what was yours, even yourselves. You greatly mortified the human self, and greatly freed the soul from what is displeasing to God, from the spirit of rebelliousness, from the spirit of rancor, from the spirit of avidity. You have given up life, justice, property, poor life, the poorest justice, and thrice poor human properties to the Lord. New Jobs, you are languishing and naked before God. You can then say, remember me. You are no longer anything, no health, no haughtiness, no wealth. You no longer possess even yourselves. You are a caterpillar that can become a butterfly or rot in the jail of the body by a final, extreme wound to the spirit. You are mire, going back to being mire, or mire turning into a star, depending on whether you prefer to go down into the adversary's sewer or rise into God's whirlwind. The final hour determines eternal life. Remember this, and cry out, "Remember me." God awaits that cry of poor Job to fill him with goods in his kingdom. It is pleasing to a father to forgive, intervene, and console. He awaits only this cry to say to you, "I am with you. Son, do not fear." Say these words to make reparation for all the times you forgot the Father or were proud. My God, why have you abandoned me? The Father sometimes seems to abandon. He is only hidden to increase expiation and grant greater forgiveness. Can man complain about this wrathfully, who has abandoned God on numberless occasions? And should he despair because God is testing him? How many things you placed in your hearts that were not God. How often you were unresponsive to him. With how many things you rejected him and drove him away. You filled your hearts with everything. You then set ironwork on your hearts and bolted them shut because you were afraid that God, on entering, might disturb your indolent quietism and purify his temple by throwing out the usurpers. As long as you were happy, what did you care about possessing God? You would say, "I already have everything because I deserved to." And when you were not happy, didn't you ever flee from God by making him the cause of all your misfortune? O unjust children who drink poison and enter into labyrinths and plunge into precipices and lairs of serpents and other beasts, and then say, "God is to blame. If God were not a Father and a Holy Father, what should he say in reply to your complaints about the painful hours when you forgot him in the happy ones?" O unjust children filled with sins, who would demand to be treated as the Son of God was not treated in the hour of the Holocaust. Tell me, who was the most abandoned one? Isn't it the Christ, the innocent one? He who to save accepted utter abandonment by God after having loved him actively at all times? And don't you bear the name of Christians? And isn't it your duty to save at least yourselves? In turbid, self-complacent indolence, fearing disturbance from accepting the active one, there is no salvation. Imitate Christ, then, by casting forth this cry at the time of most intense anguish. But make the note of the cry one of meekness and humility, not a tone of blasphemy and reproach. Why have you abandoned me? You that know that without you I can do nothing. Come, O Father, come to save me, to give me strength to save myself, because the grip of death is horrendous, and the adversary cunningly augments its power over me, and hisses that you no longer love me. Make yourself heard, O Father, not because of my merits, but precisely because I am a non-entity with no merits, who is unable to overcome when alone, and now understands that life was work for heaven. Woe to those who are alone, it was said. Footnote 252, Ecclesiastes, chapter 4, verse 10. Woe to those who are alone at the hour of death, alone with themselves, against Satan and the flesh. But do not fear. If you call the Father, he will come, and this humble invocation of him will make amends for your blameworthy indifference towards God, false worship, and disordered self-love, which make you indolent. I am thirsty. Yes, in all truth, when the real value of eternal life has been grasped over against the false coin of earthly life, when the purification of pain and death is accepted as holy obedience, when one has grown more in wisdom and grace before God in a few hours, sometimes in a few minutes, than in many years of life, a deep thirst arises for heavenly waters and heavenly realities. The lusts of all human thirsts are overcome, but the supernatural thirst to possess God arises, the thirst for love. The soul aspires to drink in love and be drunk by it, like water, which has rained down upon the ground and does not want to become mud, but to go back to being a cloud. The soul is now thirsty to ascend to the place from which it has descended. With the walls of the flesh nearly broken, the prisoners feel the breezes of the place of origin and long for it with their entire self. What exhausted pilgrims, on seeing their birthplace now close by after years, do not muster their strength and continue swiftly and tenaciously, unconcerned about anything but reaching the point from which they set forth one day, where they left behind all their real good, now sure that they will find it and enjoy it even more, because they have gained experience of the poor, unsatisfying good which they encountered in the place of exile. I am thirsty, thirsty for you, my God, thirsty to possess you, thirsty to give you. For on the threshold between earth and heaven, one is already able to grasp love for one's neighbor as it should be grasped, and there comes a desire to act, to give God to the neighbor we are leaving, the holy industriousness of the saints who as dead seeds become ears of grain and disseminate themselves in love to give love and make love be loved by those who are still in the struggles of the earth. I am thirsty. There is no longer any water except one which can quench thirst when the soul reaches the threshold of life, the living water, God Himself. True love, God Himself, love set against selfishness. Selfishness has died before the flesh in its pleasures, and love reigns. And love cries out, I am thirsty for you and for souls, to save, to love, to die in order to be free to love and save, to die in order to be born, to leave behind in order to possess, to refuse all sweetness, all comfort, for everything is vanity here below, and the soul wants only to plunge into the river, into the ocean of the divinity, drink from it, be in it, with no more thirst, for the fount of the water of life will have received it. To feel this thirst in order to make reparation for lovelessness and lust. Everything is finished. All the acts of renunciation, all the sufferings, all the trials, the struggles, the victories, the offerings, everything. There now remains nothing but to present oneself before God. The time granted to creatures to become gods and to Satan to tempt them is over. Pain ceases, the trial ceases, the struggle ceases. There remains only judgment and loving purification, or there comes the immediate, most blessed dwelling in heaven. But what is earth and human will come to an end. Everything is finished. The expression of complete resignation, or joyful recognition of having concluded the trial and consummated the Holocaust. I do not contemplate those dying in mortal sin, who do not say everything is finished, but with a howl of victory and tears of pain, respectively, the victorious angel of darkness and the defeated guardian angel say so for them. I am speaking to repentant sinners, good Christians, or the heroes in virtue. These, increasingly alive in spirit, as death seizes the flesh, murmur or cry out, resigned or joyful. Everything is consummated. The sacrifice is ending. Take it as my expiation. Take it as my offering of love. This is what spirits say as their next to last expression, depending on whether they are undergoing death through the common law or offering it through a voluntary sacrifice as victim souls. But both the former and the latter, when they have now reached liberation from matter, rest their spirits on God's chest, saying, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. Maria, do you know what it means to die with this elevation coming alive in one's heart? It is to die in God's kiss. There are many preparations for death, but on the basis of my words, believe that this one, in its simplicity, is the holiest. Jesus provided this dictation at 12. When the vision received in the early hours of the morning had ended, I thought I had finished writing, and had set about sewing, laboriously, but out of necessity, to prepare linen needed in the house. I tossed aside the thimble and needle, and took up the pen again, and extremely ill as I was, I received this preparation for death as a true, most precious gift. Footnote 253. We omit about 38 handwritten pages dated July 21st and 28th, and August 4th, 11th, and 18th, 1946, containing Azariah's commentaries on the Masses for the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th Sundays after Pentecost.